Chapman, I'm back tomorrow, 3:45. Checkpoint next. See you tomorrow.
Te whakarungo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Ea Haere Aki nei, after taking a deep dive into the books, Auckland's elusive new mayor warns ratepayers the city's sailing into an economic and fiscal storm. So what's Wayne Brown seen that is so shocking, and who will he choose as his 2IC? We check in with some potential contenders and talk live to the Auckland Council's CEO. Sensitive patient data has been leaked onto the dark web more than a week after hackers hit a health provider. A cybersecurity expert explains what could happen next. And Fuller's uses Uber to ferry its passengers around after sailings are cancelled. And we're not just talking once or twice, we're talking hundreds of times.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te ahi ahi. Good afternoon, I'm Evie Ashton. Auckland's new mayor is calling on the head of one of the city's council-controlled organisations to quit. Wayne Brown urged Ike Panuku Development Auckland chairperson Paul Majuri to resign after receiving briefings today on the council's finances. The briefing covered not just the council, but also council-controlled organisations, including Ike Panuku, the city's economic development arm. Mr Brown says he was shocked about the value for money ratepayers are getting from the organisation. He praised Auckland Transport chairperson Adrian Young-Cooper for demonstrating integrity and leadership by stepping down on Saturday night. He says Paul Majuri should show similar integrity and leadership. Mr Brown says Aucklanders are sailing into an economic and fiscal storm. An Auckland restaurant owner says she hopes the new mayor will deliver on his promises for the CBD. The owner of Ima Cuisine on Fort Street, Yael Shohart, says she hopes Mr Brown will follow through on plans to help businesses.
He was really keen on moving the cones, which will probably be great for us. Cheap parking early in the week. I hope that he gets things going.
Yael Shohart says she hopes new leadership will bring life back into the city. A cancer care advocate says Southland Hospital is on the brink of collapse. Melissa Vining says she's received a large number of messages from patients and staff outlining their concerns. Timothy Brown has more.
One staff member has described the staffing crisis as dire. A patient's parent has told RNZ they've been waiting weeks just to hear back from a paediatrician. Melissa Vining says the hospital's paediatric assessment unit has been closed for weeks, and Lakes and Gore district patients have been diverted to Dunedin due to staff shortages. One Southland Hospital staff member told Ms Vining staff are breaking down every shift due to the crisis. Te Whatu Order Southern has confirmed the paediatric assessment unit has been closed, quote, on and off for the past 3 weeks, and some care is being deferred.
Prosecutors say a leading ADHD doctor's expertise doesn't give him the right to wrongly prescribe medication thousands of times. Auckland GP Tony Han is facing misconduct charges for prescribing ADHD medication alone when he was supposed to get approval from a specialist first. He says he wanted to help patients who struggle to get access in the current system. Prosecuting lawyer Belinda Johns acknowledges Dr. Han is respected by colleagues and grateful patients, but she says the rules are there to prevent misuse of the drugs, including Ritalin.
Any expertise Dr. Han may have in the area of ADHD does not put him above the law and allow him to flout the rules.
The National Party leader, Christopher Luxon, is refusing to get into discussions over coalition arrangements after potential partner ACT released a co-governance policy. ACT's policy document proposes passing legislation that says all citizens have the same political rights before putting it to a binding public referendum. Leader David Seymour says the referendum is a coalition bottom line, but Christopher Luxon says it's too soon to discuss coalitions. He says National opposes co-governance residents because it leads to poor outcomes and builds massive bureaucracies. And an Auckland rest home says it's considering closing down after months of operating at a loss. Waiatarua Mercy Parklands says it's had to reduce bed capacity due to a crippling staff shortage. Board Chair Arthur Morris says despite best efforts, the home is still 24 staff short.
It was almost like someone turned the recruitment tap off in April, May this year, and we haven't been able to recruit staff.
Arthur Morris says as a result, Parklands is losing around $100,000 a month. In sport, the Black Ferns are hoping referees will crack down on teams slowing the game down at the Rugby World Cup. New Zealand's fast, expansive style was stifled during the early stages of their tournament opening win over Australia. Assistant coach Whitney Hansen expects opposition teams to use the scrum as a chance to take momentum out of the game.
Hopefully that's something that the referees will look at and police. We're certainly practising how quickly we can do it. Our trainings, we reckon we've got it down to about 10 seconds. So bring on opposition, we're welcome to any challenges around that.
Meanwhile, Damien McKenzie has been confirmed in the inaugural All Blacks 15 squad for 2 matches next month. The Waikato utility back is part of a 28-strong squad to be captained by Blues lock Patrick Tuipulotu. The All Blacks 15 play Ireland A in Dublin and the Barbarians in London. The Black Caps all-rounder Daryl Mitchell has been cleared to travel to Australia for the T20 World Cup later this month. Mitchell, who's sitting out the current Tri-Series in Christchurch with a broken hand, is thankful the selectors have given him the green light.
It's obviously a bit niggly timing with it being so close, but just really lucky that I guess the fracture's in a good spot and it's going to be able to heal in time, hopefully, for the first game.
The Black Caps play Pakistan tomorrow. And New Zealand squash players Paul Cole and Joelle King are safely through to the third round at the US Open. That's the news.
A blue wave sweeps local council.
We're seeing that movement away from Labor, and I think this is another data point that starts to make us think about the 2023 general election and how that might be quite close.
Auckland Transport Board on shaky ground.
Everyone's remaining for a little bit.
And trouble leaving Parliament.
Chris Farfoy sat around the cabinet table, gained access to confidential information in politics. He can now go and immediately use that for private clients.
All you need to know, morning report from 6 on RNZ National.
This is RNZ National on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. From Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumarunui. Mostly cloudy with occasional light showers, especially about the ranges. Rain developing south of Waikato tomorrow. From Whanganui to the Kapiti coast, cloudy periods. Rain for a time tomorrow morning. From Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington, including Taihape. Cloudy periods, scattered rain spreading north to Hawke's Bay tomorrow. Looking at Nelson, Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, showers but rain with heavy falls in Fiordland. Spreading north today, then easing overnight. Severe gale northerlies in exposed parts of Fiordland today. Marlborough and Canterbury, high cloud. Rain developing inland this afternoon or evening with severe gale northwesterlies in Canterbury. Becoming fine tomorrow, but cloud increasing later with showers developing. Otago and Southland, showers becoming isolated tomorrow morning, then clearing. Northwest gales today, possibly severe in exposed places. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, rain tomorrow afternoon. It's 7 minutes past 5. Our next news headlines and traffic is at 5:20.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Day one on the job and Auckland's new mayor has taken a deep dive into the city's books. And according to him, the numbers aren't good. Apart from a brief media conference as he arrived at work, the mayor has declined all one-on-one interviews today. He says the city is sailing into an economic and fiscal storm. So given the challenges, what is top of Aucklanders' list under the new city's leadership? Reporter Louise Tanuth went to find out.
He's a keen surfer, and Wayne Brown's ridden a wave right to the council buildings on Albert Street. winning the mayoral chains, carrying a bunch of promises he now needs to make a reality.
We have been rising steadily all year long. It was a marathon and it was quite well planned. And it's like a lot of other things that I've done in the past. There's a lot of planning goes on beforehand and the result comes out eventually and everyone's quite surprised.
Surprised and now ready to see action. Here in Manukau City Centre, the territory of former two-term local councillor Efessel Collins, what do people want to see from their new mayor Wayne Brown and what's their message for him?
Always definitely housing. Price rises, too much congestion and traffic on the road.
I was hoping for cheap transportation, especially the prices are very expensive. The other mayors just finished and still the same, no change.
I think the long wait take too much time. It's hard to travel around by bus. I know it's hard to improve too much. We can take it slow, one by one step by step.
Time will tell. Put the city in the forefront of everything he does, and will be great.
It's back in the car and I make my way to West Auckland, pulling up in Avondale. There's a few things on people's minds for the new mayor's priority list.
More people should have access to free transport because congestion here, it is a problem. So there should be some way to actually encourage people to use buses and all that so that there's less traffic on the road. Just do a good job and look after us Aucklanders. That's what we want. And we'll be very happy.
There's a lot of troubled youth, right? Even with the ram raids and shit. So I would say probably create systems that are gonna help the kids not get into that kind of stuff. Youth are the future, right?
Sushi B owner Yuang thinks the mayor can help him get people through his door.
I'm really wanting to have more car parking place, temporarily 15 or 60 minutes for something. Customer, they want to grab food fast in the lunchtime.
And Sunny from Ray's Dairy on Rosebank Road says Wayne Brown needs to focus on businesses.
I think we're having an issue, 40% business is going down. Very difficult to pay everything, the rates and everything is going up. The price has gone up, everything is very high in Auckland now.
Out of the car and on my feet, and I'm walking along Auckland's Queen Street. Around here is bustling with construction, with the city rail link running through the artery of the CBD. It's the disruption it's causing and the hangover from COVID lockdowns that's on the minds of people here.
Probably just the dearth of people in the main street, in Queen Street. The fact that it just looks a big mess nowadays. The ram raids especially are very sort of disquieting. So I don't hold out much hope for the new mayor though, unfortunately.
Yael from Ema Cuisine hopes the mayor will have the needs of CBD businesses at heart.
I hope that he brings more life into the city. He is really keen on moving the cones, which will probably be great for us. Cheap parking early in the week. I hope that he gets things going. Good luck with the council. You look like a pretty tough guy. It must be going to be hard.
The wishes of the people in the city Wayne Brown now leads.
Louise Tanuth reporting there. And while Auckland's new mayor declined our request for an interview, Checkpoint decided to call 2 returning councillors to see what their aspirations for this term are and if they're interested in being Wayne Brown's 2IC. Labour-aligned Josephine Bartley won the Maungakeke Tāmaki ward again, and right-leaning Citizens and Ratepayers councillor Desley Simpson was returned in Orake with a whopping 20,000 vote majority.
Good afternoon.
Desley, Lisa Owen calling from RNZ's Checkpoint program. How are you?
Hello, Lisa. Very well, thank you.
Congratulations. That was an incredibly convincing win. How do you feel about it?
I feel really good, actually, and I just want to thank the good folk of the Orake ward who took time out of their busy schedules to give a damn.
Desley, are you pleased with who voters have chosen for the Mayor of Auckland?
I think he's going to be a big change force, and I think he's going to please a lot of people with that.
What would you like to do this term? And what role would you like to play? Because he says he's going to have a conversation with every councillor and he wants to give them a role that, and I'm quoting him here, that interests and challenges them. So if you had your choice, what would it be, Desley?
Oh, I haven't got that far yet, Lisa. I really haven't. I'm going to have a conversation with him about that. I want to know what his objectives are. and I want him to hear, some of the things that are really interesting for me, and we'll sort of discuss that when it comes. But no, I kind of haven't positioned myself for anything specific.
You must have the single biggest majority of a councillor. So, I mean, what do you think the Deputy Mayor, how does that sound? Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson.
Well, that's not for me to decide. That is for the Mayor to decide. So,
but would you be interested in it? Yes, it's his choice, but would you be interested in it?
Look, I've always had the attitude that if someone offers you an opportunity, you should take it. So if it was offered to me, I would take it, yes.
Couple of quick questions, because he's been very clear about what he feels about Auckland Transport. Do you reckon the rest of the board should go, Desley?
I think there are some members of the board that absolutely should stay. I think it's a bigger issue, and it's not necessarily. I think there's a bigger issue in Auckland Transport around engaging with local communities and delivering on what the community wants. Yeah.
When you have your meeting with him, Desley, what's the first thing you're going to say to Wayne Brown, the new mayor?
Congratulations. Congratulations. Look, Lisa, I haven't thought about it yet. I really haven't. I don't know when my meeting's going to be, and when I do, I will give it some thought.
Hi, Josephine. It's Lisa Owen calling from Radio New Zealand Checkpoint. How are you?
Oh, good, thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Have you had an opportunity to speak to the new mayor?
No, not yet. I think I'm booked in Friday morning to meet up with him.
So what are you going to say to him when you meet him?
I already emailed him what priorities for this term and my concerns and things that I find important. So I'm hoping he'll read it before we meet, because I know he is really busy, and I want to save us time and just get onto it.
That's incredibly efficient. How long have you been thinking about it?
Every day. Yeah, the issues don't go away, and they're not easy to fix. So I thought I'd take an opportunity and just lay it out for him, and I hope to be able to work together with everybody.
Did he, as they say, reach out to you first, Josephine, or did he respond to your letter and request for a meeting?
Well, I heard that his office was contacting councillors to set up appointments, so I contacted the office and said, when's my one?
So, he needs a deputy, right? What do you think? Yeah, what do you think, the characteristics of that deputy should be? And do you reckon he should be reaching across the aisle to someone who's maybe not of the same political stripes as he is?
I reckon it's because it's up to him, but the deputy's got to be someone that can work across everybody, that can support the mayor, that will do a lot of the grunt work as well. But it has to be someone that can bring everyone together, and because that's what Bill Cashmore did for us. He was like worked a lot in with the councillors.
Does that person sound like you, Josephine?
No, I'm not going to blow my own horn. No, I don't know. I don't know him, so it's really up to him. I just want to do my best for the city while I'm in there, and for my communities, because I got 3 years. So I want to make my communities proud and let them know they haven't wasted putting their faith in me.
He's been pretty clear about his agenda. Do you agree with his priorities?
I just wanted to just keep an open mind on everything, so I'd rather just get to meet him and know what his priorities are.
Is there a particular role or area of interest that you will be hoping he gives you that mandate for?
I don't have any sense of being entitled to any portfolio or anything like that. Just want to do my bit. I'd like to be in the committees. I hope he doesn't say, you can't be in this, you can't be in that. Our political affiliations really don't matter at the governing body table. Everybody's there to work for what's best for Auckland and our communities. So I hope that doesn't change.
Do you reckon everyone thinks that, though? Everyone on the council, I mean?
Nah. Oh, you won't, but they should. We should just put aside the political affiliation, just work for what's best for the city.
And that was Josephine Bartley, and earlier we heard from Desley Simpson, two returning councillors. It is almost 18 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai, stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. One of the country's leading ADHD doctors has been charged with wrongly prescribing Ritalin or similar drugs more than 5,000 times. Auckland GP Tony Han is before the Health Practitioners Disciplinary Tribunal, charged with misconduct and malpractice for ignoring some of the rules about prescribing. But his defence is suggesting those rules are unworkable and risk leaving hundreds of vulnerable patients stranded. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn was at the hearing.
Tony Han has more than 200 ADHD patients of his own and treats hundreds more referred to him by other GPs. The lawyer for the Medical Council's Professional Conduct Committee, Belinda Johns, says the prosecution doesn't doubt his experience and knowledge, and he's respected by colleagues and grateful patients.
Any expertise Dr. Han may have in the area of ADHD does not put him above the law and allow him to flout the rules.
They say Dr. Han's ignoring rules that are there for a very good reason. Anyone getting prescribed the meds must effectively get sign-off for that from a psychiatrist or a paediatrician. If they want subsidised medication, they must get specialist approval every 2 years. Dr. Han's been prescribing without that. Ms. Johns says the meds are Class B drugs under the Misuse of Drugs Act. That means they can cause harm if misused.
Such medication is a central nervous system stimulant. It's used for the treatment of ADHD because it helps increase attention and decrease impulsivity and hyperactivity in patients with ADHD. The flip side, however, is that the medication also has a non-medical use for recreational purposes, as well as addictive qualities.
A witness from MedSafe, Michael Haynes, says just because Dr. Han has the know-how doesn't mean he's above the rules. He compared it to still having to stick to the speed limit and wear a seatbelt, even if you're a great driver.
Hypothetically, I felt I had a very safe car and that I felt capable of driving at that high speed. My point was that I'd still have to comply with the law.
Dr. Han repeatedly tried to get permission from health authorities over the years to be allowed to prescribe directly and was rebuffed. His defence team will argue he had no choice but to go ahead anyway. In cross-examination, lawyer Harry Walken said Dr. Han worried about the impacts on patients who couldn't afford to see or couldn't get into a specialist.
Surely MedSafe recognised that ADHD, untreated, undiagnosed, can be catastrophic.
Mr. Walken says if the authorities recognise Dr. Han as an expert, and they do, he should be allowed to prescribe directly.
Given how difficult it is to access psychiatrists because of delays and costs, it beggars belief that he's not been approved to do it. Do you agree with that?
But the prosecution says Dr. Han was repeatedly warned he couldn't prescribe and did it anyway. The tight prescription rules are under review by the government.
It is 21 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaara, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Auckland's new mayor says he's, shocked at the value for money that Auckland is getting after doing a deep dive into the books of the city. 2 hours, he was showing all the numbers and he says there are several risks and, clearly he's not happy about it. Tell us what you think. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz or send us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie's standing by with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. Auckland's new mayor, Wayne Brown, has called for Eke Panuku Development Auckland chairperson, Paul Majuri, to resign after being briefed on the council-controlled organisation. Mr Brown says he was shocked at the value for money ratepayers are getting from the organisation. Meanwhile, Wayne Brown may lose his narrow majority of support around the council table, with 2 seats changing hands to favour left-leaning councillors. The National Party leader, Christopher Luxon, says it's too soon to discuss coalitions after Potential Partner Act released a policy opposing co-governance. The ACT party says the policy is a coalition bottom line. A cancer care advocate says Southland Hospital is on the brink of collapse. Melissa Vining says the hospital's paediatric assessment unit has been closed for weeks and Lakes and Gore district patients are being diverted to Dunedin due to staff shortages. Russia's President Putin has accused the Ukrainian intelligence services of carrying out an explosion on Saturday that damaged the only bridge to the occupied Crimean Peninsula. He says the attack had been aimed at destroying critically important civilian infrastructure. And the US broadcaster CNN has apologised for filming inside a nursery in Thailand where at least 37 children and teachers were killed last week. Two of its journalists were criticised for entering the daycare centre to film the crime scene. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic on Auckland's southern motorway, a crash that was blocking the right southbound lane after the Market Road off-ramp has been cleared, but there may be delays. And in Wellington City tonight, the Terrace Tunnel will be closed from 9 p.m. until 5:30 in the morning. For tunnel maintenance, you'll need another route. That's it for headlines and traffic. We'll have more headlines and traffic for you at 5:40.
Kia ora rā, iho. The past has caught up with a big bunch of badly behaving English football fans. The UK government has banned 1,300 supporters from travelling to the upcoming World Cup in Qatar, forcing them to hand in their passports. Sports reporter Clay Wilson joins me now for more. This is really interesting, Clay. So bad news for the fans if they had any hopes of heading over there to support the England team. What do we know about them? Why has it happened now? All these questions and more.
We discussed passports a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, with the Jamaican netball team. Never a good thing not to have your passport, and especially if you're a mad football fan of the English team and you're one of these people. So they're basically, as of Friday, they have to hand in their passports to the UK government, these 1,300 fans. And these are fans that have got what they call football banning orders. And it's basically if they've been convicted of some kind of disorder, some kind of violence at a football match in the past, you get handed one of these football banning orders. And if you're on this list, bad luck, you've got to hand your passport in. So starting from Friday and going all the way through to the last day of the World Cup in Qatar, they're not going to be able to have their passports, or in theory anyway. They're also going to be stopping anyone they know of who doesn't have one of these orders but has behaved badly or been known to be a troublemaker at football matches. So it's going to be other people that are perhaps going to be being stopped. They're going to have all kinds of operations at various ports to stop these people leaving. So they go into some kind of effort to stop these.
Yeah, it's pretty labour and resource intensive, it seems.
Yeah, people that are obviously capable of causing a fair bit of havoc if they get away to a tournament like this. So these fans can seek permission to go, but it sounds like they're going to have to go through pretty thorough checks if they're going to get permission to get to the World Cup. And it's not a new thing. So 1,200 were banned for the last World Cup. English fans were banned for the last World Cup in Russia. 2,200 for Brazil in 2014 and more than 3,000 for South Africa in 2010. So it's something the UK government's been doing for a while to prevent any kind of embarrassment and trouble by their football fans.
And apparently the behaviour is improving because the numbers I see from what you read we're tracking down. But in saying that, these bans have come at a time when football violence in England as well is back on the rise again. Yeah, so football-related arrests last season were up 60%. On the previous season. I wonder how much of that's around COVID frustration, struggles and with that issue perhaps, but not a good number. There were incidents at 1,600 football matches last season. More than half of the football matches played in this part of the world, there was incidents of this nature. So it just goes to show what kind of a problem it is. And do we know what they are, Clay? When they say there's an incident, do we know what it is? Or examples? I'm sure it's incidents inside and outside the stadium, violence, causing trouble, bothering police, security, all those kinds of things. I mean, these football hooligans, I guess they're better known as, a lot of these people have been causing trouble for a long time, haven't they? It's nothing new in this part of the world, and unfortunately it doesn't look like it's going to rest up anytime soon. I mean, only have to go back to 2020, the European Championships. England made the final. There was a heck of a lot of trouble that happened at that game at Wembley. Fans storming in and then violently attacking Italian fans after England lost the game. So, yeah, unfortunately not a problem. It looks like it's going to go away anytime soon. Yeah, interesting measures though. Thanks for that, Clay. That's Clay Wilson, sports reporter there. An Auckland rest home says it may be forced to close its doors if it can't find 24 more healthcare workers. The not-for-profit Mercy Parklands rest home in Ellerslie says they're so short-staffed they've been forced to reduce beds at a cost of more than $100,000 a month. Our reporter Finn Blackwell has more.
For Waiatarua Mercy Parklands, a chronic staffing shortage means they've had to cut their 97-bed capacity down to 70. And even at that level of occupancy, the not-for-profit aged care facility simply can't cover costs. Board Chair Arthur Morris says despite best efforts, there's still 24 staff short.
It was almost like someone turned the recruitment tap off in April, May this year, and we haven't been able to recruit staff.
Mr. Morris says the home, which was founded by Mercy nuns, needs 9 more nurses and 15 more healthcare assistants to go back to full occupancy. In the meantime, the home is losing $100,000 a month.
The board will be meeting this week on more than one occasion to look at all the modelling that's been done, all the suggestions that have come in to see if there's a way we can make ends meet in the long term to be financially viable.
New Zealand Aged Care Association Chief Executive Simon Wallace says the Mercy Parkland situation isn't unique.
What we are seeing in a number of care homes across the country is that they are simply struggling to keep beds open, keep their doors open and beds operating because of a shortage of registered nurses.
An entry-level aged care nurse can expect to earn around $57,000 with shift allowances, compared to around $72,000 for a nurse working in a hospital. In the short term, Mr. Wallace says registered nurses coming in from overseas need to be put on the immigration green list and given residency from day one.
The Minister of Immigration could do that tomorrow if he chose to, and we urge him to do that.
He says if the situation doesn't change, things will get much worse.
We're in a crisis in the aged care sector at the moment. This crisis has been playing out all year. We've been warning the government about this. Older people are being displaced from homes, and that is not good for them and it is not good for their families.
Aged care nurse Marianne Bishop says the industry desperately needs more funding.
There needs to be more money put into the sector, I believe, from ministry, from the government. There needs to be more funding so that staff can be paid better, and there needs to be better regulations around staffing.
Today's news of Mercy Parkland's recruitment struggle comes on the same day the Deputy Health and Disability Commissioner found the rest home failed in its care for an elderly man with a complex medical history. In a finding released this afternoon, Rose Walls said the man, who suffered from dementia, vascular disease, skin cancer and prostate cancer, developed pressure injuries and weight loss over a period of time which were preventable. Board Chairman Arthur Morris says the case was historic and has been dealt with, and Ms Walls says there has been a conscientious effort invested by the care home and its staff to ensure safe and empathetic care is provided to its residents. Mr Morris says in the meantime, the community is rallying and fundraising to keep the home open.
The families have got strong support for Parklands, and there is a group that is actively raising some money and planning fundraising to assist Parklands.
And that was a report by Finn Blackwell. It is 5:30. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news. Ko taku hoe e nai nei ko Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas joins us live in the studio. Okay, Sky sews up Rugby World Cup rights. What are the dates, Nicholas?
Yeah, we sort of knew this was on the cards. Sky TV confirming earlier this year that it was in advanced negotiations with World Rugby, but we did finally get that confirmation today, as well as the details which tell us that they will have the rights to broadcast major World Rugby events for 7 years, and that includes both men's and women's World Cups as well as World Sevens tournaments. No price was given. We can only speculate. Fair to assume it was a hefty price. They did beat out Warner Brothers Discovery as well as Spark Sport for these rights, but as part of the transaction, Sky will sell its Rugby Pass service, which has been a bit of an underperformer for the company, to World Rugby. So that may have probably factored into the price as well.
So we're going back to watching this stuff on, well, when I say the normal TV, I don't want to sound like an old person, but on the normal TV, instead of like after all the issues with streaming and watching it onto the interwebs.
Yeah, like that's precisely, that was going to be one of the points to raise, right? Was that last time that the World Cup, streaming it for the first time, for many people probably their first time streaming a sports event, there were a few hiccups along the way, shall we say. You know, I remember that first night when people Twitter, for
the
example.
Master of understatement, Nicholas Poynton.
Yeah,
okay, so a few hiccups, yes.
There were a few hiccups, but I'm interested to know for people who've already cancelled their Sky subscription, will this drive them to maybe take another subscription? How are they going to watch it? Are they going to get a set-top box again? Are they going to perhaps just get a streaming pass for a couple of months?
Let's ask them. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Are you going to go back to Sky, especially for this? Because it ain't cheap, is it?
No, it won't be, and that's the calculation Sky TV would have done here. Broadcast rights aren't cheap, right, by their nature, but, the key thing here is how do they, to use a business journalism jargon term, how will they leverage this? What sort of flow through are they going to get through in sort of their subscription numbers, and what will the nature of those subscriptions be? Will it be sort of the short-term hits, people just getting a subscription for a couple of months, or will they be able to entice people to stick around for a while? It'll be really interesting to see what sort of packages they may be offering in the next year or so.
The penny has just kind of dropped while I've been listening to you there, Nicholas. So if you're already subscribing to the sports channels, are they going to make you pay more to get this on a specific channel? Will you get it as part of your all-in sports package as well? All these questions and more.
I would assume if you already have sport, if you already pay for the sports channels, you would naturally just get access to sort of watch World Rugby events as well. That's sort of been how things have worked in the past. I don't know why it would be any different to try and sell an additional package on top of that. I can imagine that would perhaps alienate some of your consumers.
All right, we'll watch that space. Okay, Plasterboard. We've done so much on this in the crisis, but what? It's all over?
Well, I don't know. All over, perhaps that's a bit of a stretch. Let's say that that mismatch between supply and demand is sort of easing. There was a period this year where Plasterboard, just a basic building material was the biggest business story in the country, and that it was really triggered after, if we all go back and remember when the KiwiSaver provider and social housing builder Simplicity publicly fired Fletcher Building as its plasterboard supplier. In the months following, we heard there was a government task force set up to investigate this. Fletcher Building announced in July at its Investor Day, had already announced a raft of changes, but they said come October, they believe the market would reach equilibrium. They said the raft of changes that they made would increase supply by about 10%. Well, it's been 4 months. We did a ring around of some of the builders and the suppliers and the merchants, material merchants, about this, just to get their perspective. What are they seeing on the ground? And it's clear that there has been some improvement. Things have gotten better. One person we spoke to said that the lead times for Jibboard reduced from about 7 months down to 1. And so also we had some response from Fletcher Building saying that they believe the worst of the shortages are now over. Demand is still high, they say. There have been some positive trends back to more normalised levels of demand. And they say some of those changes they made to their factory that helped increase supply from about 2.9 million square metres of Jibboard produced every month to about 3.25. And one of the big things that they've been saying throughout this period is that they have a new manufacturing site being set up in Tauranga. They expect that to come online midway through next year. That final point I just want to add around this, I know we've been talking about it for a while, but there was a ministerial task force set up to address this. We spoke to someone on that task force, Naylor Love Chief Executive Rick Hurd. We asked him, what do you think you achieved during that period? And the point he made was that they helped improve communication with both consenting authorities and builders about alternative products in the market. We then followed up and asked, are there more alternative products being used in New Zealand? He said no. And the reality is, as he says, is that we have a fixation with Jibboard in this country. It's the product that's most widely used. It's the one that builders are so familiar with using. Bigger players like himself, he says, well, look, we're going to always look to imported products to sort of diversify where he gets plasterboard from. But for the smaller house builders in this country, they tend to just stick with what they're used to. So to me, it seems that lessons have not been learnt over this crisis.
Okay, Monday markets, Nicholas, and go.
Shocker of a day for the NZX, actually, down 1.7% to 10,918. Just a brief note, Pushpay Holding put out a late announcement to the market saying it's received a revised takeover for the company. The dollar trading at 56.1 US cents, 88.4 Australian and 50.6 pence.
Thanks, Nicholas. Ka kite and Nicholas Poynton there with Business News. Let's get to some of your feedback now on the issue of Wayne Brown, new Mayor of Auckland. Jim from Papamoa's got in touch. Hi, Jim, who's a regular with his feedback. He says, lol, it sounds like Wayne Brown is using his one-day deep dive into the books to soften up the electorate for the idea that he's not going to be able to fix much. Buckle up, Aucklanders. And another person says, I wonder when Wayne Brown's arrogance will get him in trouble. I doubt he'll last his term, but it won't be his fault because he can fix everything. Shane from Hastings with that feedback. And do get in touch also about the Sky TV subs. Are you going to be signing up specifically to get World Cup rights? Will you be returning to that service? 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The Prime Minister is shrugging off the local body election results, which saw a dramatic swing to the right across many centres. The opposition parties are hoping to leverage the result to propel them into the government next year. But Jacinda Ardern says it's not so simple. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Forget Labour's red wave of 2020. The local elections saw barely a dribble. The left routinely punished around the country, with the mayors of major centres switching allegiance from left to right. Auckland, Rotorua, Christchurch, Dunedin. For Labour, you can either laugh or cry. Jacinda Ardern has chosen the former. She's not reading into the results. She does not regard them, she says, as a reflection of a wider sentiment.
You only need to look at Auckland for an example. You know, under Helen Clark, you had the likes of John Banks. Under John Key, you had the likes of Len Brown. We've often seen very different outcomes between central and local government.
That's true, and the low turnout, about 40%, recommends some caution be taken in interpreting results. That said, the rightward swing is also reflected in nationwide polling, and both the candidates endorsed by Ms Ardern, Efeso Collins in Auckland and Paul Eagle in Wellington, were soundly defeated. Both National and ACT put the result down to widespread voter frustration and invocation for change.
People feel they've got a government that frankly isn't listening to them, is becoming arrogant. They feel very strongly that there is a need for change, and importantly they want governments, whether they're local governments or central governments, to be able to get things done.
People saying, look, we don't think our council's listening, so maybe that's a message for people of all political stripes.
Both parties spy an opportunity here. Both name the government's Three Waters project as a source of voter fury. Political lecturer Lara Greaves from Auckland University thinks that response is only going to grow.
We're going to see a lot more sort of drama, a lot more protest, a lot more disagreement, and it's an open question whether Labour will back down and back away.
The Porirua Mayor Anita Baker has been one of the few mayors in favour of the proposed changes to water management. She was re-elected on Saturday for a second term. Ms Baker hopes the government doesn't lose its nerve, but says at the same time Labour must not simply dismiss the message behind the local election results.
I don't care who's in, as long as they actually help local government with the funding of infrastructure, because we've all reached our borrowings where we can and we can't, and our rates just can't keep going up. None of us can afford it. You know, the system is broken somewhere.
For now, the Prime Minister's not showing signs of a back down. She argues the changes are necessary.
If we stick with the status quo means thousands of dollars in rate rises for New Zealanders. No one wants that. That's why we're having to proceed with reforms to water infrastructure.
She has left herself some wiggle room, though. MPs will report back with advice next month after hearing public feedback. And the Prime Minister acknowledges there will be some changes. The question is, will they be enough to placate the new army of centre-right mayors?
It's 19 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We love your feedback, so do get in touch. Homai or whakaaro on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Sports, subscriptions, Sky, the new mayor in Auckland. Let us know your reckons, 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Anaya iwi mina pita pita kōrero.
The National Party leader, Christopher Luxon, says the local election results show there's widespread frustration at the status quo. Auckland, Rotorua, Whanganui, Christchurch and Dunedin all elected centre-right mayors over the weekend, having previously had centre-left. The winner of the Far North's mayoral race will remain up in the air for at least another day. Former Deputy Mayor Anne Court was ahead in preliminary results, I should say, on Saturday, but Moko Te Pāngia took the lead in special vote results announced yesterday. Prosecutors say a leading ADHD doctor's expertise doesn't give him the right to wrongly prescribe medication thousands of times. Auckland GP Tony Han is facing misconduct charges for prescribing ADHD medication without approval from a specialist. The lawyer for a Wellington musician accused of a number of sex attacks says that the women either consented to sexual activity or he wasn't involved at all. The 25-year-old man faces sexual violation and indecent assault charges in Wellington District Court. North Korea says the spate of missiles it launched last week were in preparation for a nuclear weapons test. Pyongyang has launched 7 missiles since the end of September. And Taiwan's foreign minister is hoping for continued support from New Zealand as the self-governing island faces heightened aggression from China. At National Day celebrations in Taipei today, Joseph Wu said Taiwan shares similar values with New Zealand. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in the south, State Highway 94 between Milford Sounds and Te Anau is closed now and won't reopen until probably tomorrow morning at 8:30am once a full road check is completed after the heavy rain forecast. In Wellington City, the Terrace Tunnel will be closed tonight between 9 and 5:30am. And in Auckland, a breakdown in State Highway 20's Waterview Tunnel northbound that was blocking the right lane has now been cleared. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Thanks, Evie. Let's get to some of your feedback now, this time on Sky TV. This is Sky getting the rights back for Rugby World Cup games. I think it's for the next 7 years. This listener says, last time I signed up to Sky, we lost a home series to the Irish. I am not signing up. Okay, superstitious. I pay as I go, this person says, as I do now. Spark for Black Caps home games, Sky for away games. Another person says, I'd never go back to Sky, completely overpriced and terrible customer service. Another one in a similar vein, no to Sky, I will stop watching high-level rugby. Sensitive patient data has made its way to the dark web more than a week after a cyber attack on a primary health provider. Pinnacle Midlands Health Network operates several North Island GP practices. It says the data has been published by malicious actors. The stolen records cover more than 450,000 patients from Waikato Lakes, Taranaki and Tairawhiti districts. Technology commentator and CEO of Gorilla Tech, Paul Spain, joins us now. Kia ora, Paul. Have you seen this leaked material?
I haven't personally gone digging to have a look, but it's pretty concerning.
Why so? How dangerous from a security point of view is this?
Well, look, when we have our personal information stored, with an organisation like a health provider, it's similar in some ways to putting money in the bank. We expect these organisations to keep what we put with them safe, and so when what should be a trusted organisation isn't able to keep our private information safe, then that really erodes trust, and it can lead to situations where we see identity theft, and that's not something you really want to wish on your worst enemy.
So this has appeared on the dark web now, more than a week after we were told that it was in essence stolen. Why now? What do you reckon's going on behind the scenes?
So what happens when cyber criminals take over a system? They will take as much data as they can to hold the organisation to ransom. In the old days, the information, there was usually 2 aspects to it. One, in the old days there was one primary aspect, which is they would encrypt your data, and if you didn't have a backup, then you had to pay to get it back. Now what they add in is this aspect of they steal it and then they threaten to release it publicly if you don't pay up. So usually this type of scenario that we're seeing now is an organisation that's decided not to pay the ransom. And look, it's very difficult when you get to this point because they're between a rock and a hard place. At one point they're supporting the criminals, but if they don't go down that track, then they're leaving their valuable clients at risk of this identity theft and of having private information leaked.
Well, you talk about encryption, and you're talking about encryption from the point of view of the hackers once they get the material to stop you, getting it back. But should it have been this easy for the hackers to get it?
Well, we don't know all the details in this case, but if the data is stored appropriately, then it should be kept in an encrypted manner anyway. If it's private information, then that shouldn't be something that is easy for hackers to run away with. In the same way, when you use your credit card online, that information is stored in an encrypted manner, and usually the merchant you're dealing with, all they've got is a token. They don't actually store your full credit card details, and that's really what should be happening in these sorts of cases, with healthcare organisations.
So people who have had their details deposited on the dark web, first off, how would they know that? And second, what should they be doing? Because you talked about identity theft. Do you need to renew documents? What do you do?
Yeah, look, there are services that you can sign up for online that will alert you if your data, comes up in some sort of a publicly accessible data breach. So that's one approach to sort of keeping an eye on what's going on. But if you're sure that it's happened, or you want to minimise the risk because maybe you're one of Pinnacle's clients, then in that sort of case, then you've got to look at what is the data that they had. So let's say if they had something like a driver's license type information, then you may want to cancel your driver's license and get a new driver's license issued. And this is what we've seen in Australia with the Optus breach in the last few weeks, is that Optus have had to step up to pay for people to go out and get new documents, and also paying for those identity monitoring services to help their customers.
Good to talk to you, Paul. That is Paul Spain, who's the CEO of Gorilla Tech and a technology commentator. I'd love to hear from you if you're one of the people whose information is turned up on the web. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Fuller's has called on Uber to pick up Auckland transport commuters on at least 350 occasions this year when it's had to cancel ferries. On hundreds more occasions when the cancellation has happened at peak time, ferry replacement buses have been deployed. Neither Fuller's nor Auckland Transport can say how much the rides have cost. Katie Todd has the story.
A morning jaunt across the sparkling waters of the Waitemata Harbour. It's certainly an enticing way to commute. Yet online travel alerts posted by Auckland Transport show its 13 ferry services, run by Fuller's, have been plagued by mechanical issues, crew shortages, poor weather and other so-called operational constraints. On at least 350 occasions this year, the travel alerts show Fuller's has chosen to offer Ubers or taxis to commuters as an alternative. Commuters pay their regular ferry fee, share the cab with other people where possible, and can only be dropped directly to the ferry terminal they were intending to go. This substitute is not welcomed by all. Here's Half Moon Bay Residents and Ratepayers Association Chair Keith Ingram.
It is not the same. They're buddy squished into a taxi. They pay a fare to travel by ferry.
Keith Ingram says it's frustrating for Half Moon Bay residents who've already lost their direct bus to the city. Now they're faced with the choice of catching 2 buses and then a train, adding up to a total commute time of about 1 hour 20 minutes, or catching a ferry he says they can't rely on.
Yeah, ferry breaks down occasionally and Auckland Transport gets them home by no alternative means. But why can't they put a backup ferry in?
As well as the 350-odd ferry rides replaced by Ubers and taxis, ferry replacement buses are sometimes deployed to cover cancelled services at peak times. AT's travel alert suggests this has happened on about 200 occasions this year, but the true number is probably far higher. Fuller's says in total 2,312 of its 61,000 services this year have been replaced by either buses, taxis or Ubers, but it says it can't provide a further breakdown. That's on top of thousands of daily Auckland Transport bus cancellations due to short staffing, about 1,400 a day last week to be precise, and there isn't a substitute in these instances. Matt Lowry, who edits the blog Greater Auckland, says that's not how effective public transport works.
It really reflects that we've got quite a poor quality service at the moment, and that's really not encouraging people to come back and use public transport again.
Chair of Bike Auckland, Tony Mitchell, adds that taxis and Ubers aren't suitable for all commuters, like those who plan to take bikes or scooters on the ferry.
It's very difficult to just chuck a bicycle into an Uber and get around. So, we really need fullers to look a little bit deeper into understanding, what the root cause is, and to try and make sure that they resource up or can supply satisfactory ferry services, but also, if they aren't able to deliver, an alternative that actually supports people on bikes.
The cost of providing these replacement services remains an unknown. The average charge of an Uber from Half Moon Bay to the downtown ferry terminal is $42 without traffic, or it's $40 from Bayswater or $20 from Birkenhead. RNZ requested costing data from Auckland Transport under the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, but was informed it did not exist. When RNZ approached Fuller's directly, it declined to provide its data. Matt Lowry hopes to see a drop in the number of taxis and Ubers used soon.
The fact that we're having to do this in the first place is really concerning, and it shows that we've got real issues in the provision of our public transport.
AT says it acknowledges its ferry fleet has been suffering an increasing number of breakdowns in recent years, but it is taking steps to fix this. It's replacing the engines in 4 diesel vessels that it has purchased from Fuller's, and it has 7 low-emission vessels on order to replace Fuller's oldest ferries over the next 5 years.
Katie Todd reporting there. The coroner's inquest into the death of a man who was left face down in a police cell with an incorrectly fitted spit hood covering his face has begun in Auckland today. The man's family filled the public gallery at the Auckland District Court hearing today, which is expected to run all week. Amy Williams has been at the hearing.
Although police policy required Alonata to be constantly monitored, it wasn't until CCTV footage showed his hands not moving and starting to change colour that officers went to his aid. He died in hospital 2 days later. His mother, Alofanata, hopes the inquest will provide the family with some closure.
It's more like a prayer answered to get closer to some form of closure.
Coroner Matthew Bates says the inquest will cover Mr Nata's mental health and the causes and circumstances of his death, and make recommendations for change accordingly. Police and custody officers called as witnesses today gave evidence about what happened when Mr Nata was transported to a cell and how he was restrained and monitored thereafter. This custody officer was one who helped take off the man's restraints.
He was violent, he was moving, he was struggling the whole time.
But the spit hood was left on.
I was going to take it off and my sergeant said just leave it on, he can take it off himself. So we left it on him.
Officers administered CPR in the cell when they realised Mr Nata was not responsive, and he was taken to hospital in an ambulance. His mother, Alofanata, was at a church conference in Tonga in 2018 when she received a call to come home and see her son, that it could be his final days. Now she says they're facing the inquest in the hope any changes recommended at the end will prevent similar deaths.
With lots of prayer for a day like this, I'm feeling that extra comfort to sit down and intake everything, because it's not going to change the past, but it might change the future.
The inquest continues.
It is 5 minutes to 6. Kia amo tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The first COVID vaccine that specifically protects against the Omicron variant is being rolled out in Australia today. Omicron has been the dominant variant in New Zealand and Australia this year. Doctors across the Tasman hope it will spark an increase in booster uptake. The ABC's Angus Randall reports.
From today, you can get a COVID booster that's been designed to fight back against Omicron. Professor Christine McCartney is the director of the National Centre for Immunisation Research and Surveillance.
The booster that's been registered in people 18 years and older is one of the mRNA vaccines by Moderna, and it has a 50-50 mixture now of the original strain, well, the code for the original strain, and then the code for the Omicron spike protein. And so that just makes it a little bit more tailored to the virus that we know is circulating in the community now, which is the Omicron variant, and that's going to give us slightly small edge in improving the booster response.
This Moderna vaccine is already slightly out of date, as new subvariants have emerged since the clinical trials. But Professor McCartney says she's not too concerned about subtle mutations in the virus.
Well, this one has the Omicron BA1 variant, which we've already gone past because we're now largely having BA4 and 5 circulating in the community. These are what are called subvariants of Omicron. But we're not actually chasing the new variant coming up because, of course, that's impossible to predict. What we're seeking to do is just increase what we'd call the breadth of our immunity. So it's like the experience that our immune system has in, dealing with variations of this virus that causes COVID-19. And when you get a booster, and particularly when you get a variant booster, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that the immune response is more durable and it's broader. You're really training your immune system to, fight the virus better.
She says if your doctor is yet to receive the new booster, any vaccine is better than none.
There also will be the existing vaccine still out there and available in fridges too. And there's not an enormous difference between the original booster and this new, 50-50 Omicron booster. Overall, the message is just to get a booster if you're due one.
Anyone 30 years and older is eligible for a fourth vaccine dose. Dr Rod Pearce is the chair of the Immunisation Coalition.
Over 80% of the people between 30 and 50 who haven't had that fourth dose, so there's a lot of people who would benefit from having something that's closer to the variants that we're seeing.
Pfizer and Novavax are also working on shots that can protect against recent COVID variants, but these are still in the trial phase.
Interesting story. I wondered if you'd be interested in a strain-specific COVID booster. Let us know. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A lot of feedback on the Mayor in Auckland, Wayne Brown. This person says, haha, Mr Brown comes in and identifies a crisis needing a hero. Oh, wait. Here he is, Mr Brown himself. Someone else says, please tell me it takes more than 2 hours to review Auckland Council's financial books. That one from Sarah. Another person says, I'm a bit puzzled as to why Wayne Brown is shocked by his briefing on the city's finances today. It's the annual report and the mandatory pre-election report, isn't it? These are public and he could have looked at them at any time during the campaign if he had bothered. Jeff says Wayne Brown's repeated claim that Auckland is broken may have won over Conservative voters, but it's simplistic jargon that ignores all the good work that's gone into developing and improving the city.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora tātou. Good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. Auckland's new mayor is calling on the head of the city's economic development arm to quit after receiving briefings on council finances. Wayne Brown urged Eke Panuku Development Auckland chairperson Paul Majuri to resign this afternoon. Mr Brown says he was shocked about the value for money ratepayers are getting from the organisation. He praised Auckland Transport chairperson Adrian Young-Cooper for demonstrating integrity and leadership by stepping down on Saturday night. He says Paul Majuri should show similar integrity and leadership. Mr Brown said Aucklanders are sailing into an economic and fiscal storm. Returning Auckland Councillor Desley Simpson could be a contender for the city's deputy mayor. The Ōrākei councillor has told Checkpoint the role of deputy is for the mayor to decide, but she will take it if offered.
Look, I've always had the attitude that if someone offers you an opportunity, you should take it. So if it was offered to me, I would take it, yes.
Wayne Brown is expected to meet with councillors this week to discuss the upcoming term. The winner of the Far North's mayoral race will remain up in the air for at least another day. Former Deputy Mayor Anne Court was ahead in preliminary results on Saturday and received hundreds of congratulatory messages, but Moko Te Pāngia took the lead in special vote results announced yesterday. The council says it won't finish counting until tomorrow at the earliest. Ms Court says losing the lead is tough.
It would be easier if Moko was a horrible human being. But he's not. He's a really, really nice guy. And I just wanted to say that whoever wins, I know that the other candidate will back them 100%.
And court is considering asking for a recount if she loses. The National leader, Christopher Luxon, is arguing the local election results are a call for change from voters. Auckland, Rotorua, Whanganui, Christchurch and Dunedin all elected centre-right mayors over the weekend, having previously had centre-left civic leaders. Mr Luxon says there's widespread frustration at the status quo.
People feel they've got a government that frankly isn't listening to them, is becoming arrogant. They feel very strongly that there is a need for change, and importantly they want governments, whether they're local governments or central governments, to be able to get things done.
But the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says simple comparisons can't be made between sentiment at local and central government. Prosecutors say a leading ADHD doctor's expertise doesn't give him the right to wrongly prescribe medication thousands of times. Auckland GP Tony Han is facing misconduct charges for prescribing ADHD medication directly when he was supposed to get approval from a specialist first. He says he wanted to help patients who struggle to get access in the current system. Prosecuting lawyer Belinda Johns acknowledges Dr Han is respected by colleagues and grateful patients, but she says the rules are there to prevent misuse of the drugs, including Ritalin, and having experience and knowledge is no excuse to flout them. The lawyer for a Wellington musician accused of a number of sex attacks says that, on all counts, the women either consented to sexual activity or he wasn't involved at all. The 25-year-old man, who has name suppression, is facing sexual violation and indecent assault charges from 6 complainants. His lawyer, Val Nisbet, told Wellington District Court today it's important that the jury keep an open mind.
Your job is to find the truth. And that, as you will find, it's no easy task. Memories may fail, recollections may be shaded, the evidence may point in differing directions. And you'll find that is the case here.
Val Nisbet says the charges all stem from a scene of young people who were drinking a lot and taking drugs. Firefighters are preparing for possible gales as they work to extinguish a bushfire near Queenstown. The fire started on Friday on the slopes of Mount Crichton and has since burned through roughly 230 hectares of Manuka and tussock grassland. Firefighters have been using thermal imaging to find and tackle the remaining hotspots. Incident controller Mark Mawhini says if forecast gusts of 120 kilometres an hour arrive, all firefighters will be withdrawn and aerial operations stopped. North Korea says the missiles it launched last week were in preparation for a nuclear weapons test. Pyongyang has launched 7 missiles since the end of September, one of which flew over Japan into the Pacific Ocean. Our correspondent Chris Gilbert reports.
Well, South Korea is concerned that with these upcoming world events, such as the Party Congress in China, that North Korea may attempt to draw even more attention to itself with a nuclear test. There's also concerns about how sophisticated North Korea's missiles are becoming. Of course, the one it launched on Tuesday, the longest any North Korean missile has ever flown, and also the increased capability of its nuclear program as well. Both those concerns voiced by Japan's self-defense forces last week.
And Taiwan's foreign minister is hoping for continued support from New Zealand as the self-governing island faces heightened aggression from China. At National Day celebrations in Taipei today, Joseph Wu said Taiwan shares similar values with New Zealand.
Of freedom, democracy and the protection of human rights.
Joseph Wu says Taiwan hoped to work closer with New Zealand to promote bilateral relations. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, for the scientific community, the Nobel Prize announcements are an important part of the yearly science calendar. The award is one of the most widely celebrated and provides a moment to reflect on some of the leading scientific work taking place around the world. Science in Action tonight looks at the work of the winners. Sport, music, current affairs and a look ahead to the big stories in the world this week. On Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
This is Te Reo Irirangi o Aotearoa, on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday, from Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, the Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaru Nui. Mostly cloudy with occasional light showers, especially about the ranges. Rain developing south of Waikato tomorrow. From Whanganui to the Kapiti coast, cloudy periods, rain for a time tomorrow morning. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington, including Taihape. Cloudy periods, scattered rain spreading north to Hawke's Bay tomorrow. Nelson, Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, showers, but rain with heavy falls in Fiordland, spreading north today, then easing overnight. Severe gale northerlies in exposed parts of Fiordland today. Marlborough and Canterbury, high cloud, rain developing inland this afternoon or evening, with severe gale northwesterlies in Canterbury, becoming fine tomorrow morning, but cloud increasing later with showers developing. Otago and Southland, showers becoming isolated tomorrow morning, then clearing. Northwest gales today, possibly severe in exposed places. And for Rekohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, rain tomorrow afternoon. It's 7 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines are at 6:30.
Ngā mihi Evie, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Auckland's new mayor says the city is sailing into an economic and fiscal storm. Wayne Brown says he's had a 2-hour briefing on the council's books and confirmed his concerns about several risks, including the unknown but rising costs of the city rail link and costs associated with Ports of Auckland. In a statement, he says he's shocked at the value for money ratepayers are getting from Eke Panuku development and thinks its boss should consider his position. The briefing to the Mayor came from Auckland Council CEO Jim Stabak, and Jim joins us now. Kia ora, Jim.
Kia ora, Lisa.
What's in the books that would lead Wayne Brown to announce that he's shocked that there's several risks and Auckland is heading towards an economic and fiscal storm?
Well, I think we made clear in the pre-election report that there were some challenges to deal with. We talked about the commitments we'd made around climate, equity, growth funding and financing in general. And those things clearly are challenges that we have to solve for going forward. In any environment, of course, of high inflation, inflation is running at 7%, and where rates have been on a lower trajectory than that, it sets up a gap that we have to solve for. And that was really the essence of the briefing that we provided the Mayor this morning, the Mayor-elect this morning.
So, Jim, just to be clear, is there anything new in what you told, or different, in what you told the Mayor this morning compared to pre-election disclosures?
All of the information we provided to the Mayor and his team this morning is based on our recently released annual results. They were released just last week for the year ended at the end of June. They demonstrated, I think, stable delivery of the commitments that we'd made to Aucklanders during that year. The results were signed off by the Office of the Auditor General, and we're really pleased that credit rating agencies have reaffirmed our stable outlook into the future. So it was no different to the information that we'd provided.
Okay, so no surprises
in the reports. That said, of course, as we've said in the pre-election report, there are challenges ahead because of the quickly shifting changes in the economic outlook.
Okay, well, let's talk about the CRL. Did you give him a figure for the cost of that?
No, we didn't, because I don't know a figure, Lisa. We're still waiting for CRLL to be able to brief its shareholders, one of which is Council, on the negotiations that they've been working their way through.
So that's one of the areas of concern then, an unknown figure for the CRL. What about the Ports of Auckland and the failed automation project? Wayne Brown's identified that as a risk. Got a figure for that?
Well, the figure that was or has already been released was the Ports of Auckland had written off the value of the software. That was $65 million. That's well known. Look, it's possible that there are some additional investments required going forward, but that's in line with the capital programs that they've already set out.
Okay. So the Mayor has invited the CEO of Panuku to basically follow the AT chair's example and step down. Who has the power to sack these people if they don't?
There is a legislative requirement around that. It would require a decision of the governing body or the consideration of the governing body. But again, I'm probably not going to comment
So the council as a whole would
but
need to vote on that?
that's my understanding.
Okay. And what would happen if an entire board resigned at the same time? What would happen for the operating of that organisation?
I haven't contemplated that question, Lisa, and we would have to give it some thought. I'm not anticipating that's the case. We've had we've had stable boards on the council-controlled organisations for some time, and I wouldn't expect that would be the case.
What was your impression of the new mayor today, Jim?
He's hit the ground running. He obviously has been elected on a basis of wanting to bring about change, and that's exciting for the city. Me and my team are up for how we support making that happen.
And was there anything he asked you that surprised you?
Not at all. He's clearly very, very kind of focused on making an early start and wanting to get progress quickly, and I'm looking forward to working with him on how we make that happen.
What was he focused on when you were having a conversation about the books?
Oh, I think, look, Auckland Council is, with all of its council-controlled organisations, can be quite a big and complex set of organisations to understand. So it'd be fair to say that today was really just day one. We went through a couple of hours of high-level understanding of how the relationship, the financial relationship, works between council and its CCOs, including debt and how that works. It was a preliminary, first introductory conversation, and clearly there'll be many more briefings to come for the mayor and incoming councillors over the weeks ahead.
Jim, are you staying as the CEO?
Yes, I am.
Because he's just invited quite a few people to resign. I'm wondering, did he ever mention to you that you should seek excellence elsewhere?
No, he hasn't.
Really appreciate your time, Jim. Thank you for joining us. That is the Auckland Council CEO, Jim Stabax, who was part of that briefing to the new mayor, Wayne Brown. They opened the books for him, but as he mentioned there, weren't any surprises compared to what they had in their pre-election report. Russian President Vladimir Putin is accusing Ukraine of an act of terrorism after a key strategic bridge linking Russia to occupied Crimea was badly damaged by an explosion. His comments came after Russian missile strikes in the middle of the night killed at least 13 people and reduced homes to rubble in the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia. President Zelensky accused Russia of waging constant terror against Ukraine's civilian population. The BBC's Paul Adams is in Kiev.
In Zaporizhia, this is what escalation looks like. A gaping hole where once there were homes. Rescue workers searching for the dead and the living. Moments after the blast, in the middle of the night, stunned, furious reactions. They destroyed a building at night at 2 a.m, he says. They simply destroyed a multi-story building.
We ran out into the street. When we left the corridor, a neighbor ran out with her eldest son, and she screamed that her husband was dead, and the whole wall was torn out. Their apartment fell into ours.
This was a civilian area, not a military target. Volunteers helped to clear the rubble. Local officials say scores of people were wounded. This industrial southern city is used to being hit, but its civilians are now bearing the brunt of Russia's anger. More than 60 killed in and around the city in the past 9 days. Officials say 12 missiles were fired from Russian warplanes flying safely over nearby occupied territory. Here in Kiev, President Zelensky said these were merciless strikes on peaceful people. This, he said, was absolute evil perpetrated by savages and terrorists. It all came less than 24 hours after yesterday's dramatic attack on a key bridge linking Russia with the Crimean Peninsula. Russia said this was the result of a truck bomb. Others spoke of an audacious act of Ukrainian sabotage. Tonight, Vladimir Putin directly accused Kiev.
There is no doubt that this is an act of terrorism aimed at destroying Russia's critically important civilian infrastructure, and this was devised, carried out and ordered by the Ukrainian special services.
Some road traffic has resumed. The physical damage can be repaired, but this was a profound psychological blow for Moscow. Up above, work on the ravaged railway bridge goes on. Russia says freight and passenger services have resumed. This bridge is vital to Moscow's war effort. It cannot afford to lose it.
Only one child escaped unscathed from last week's massacre at a daycare centre in northern Thailand. 3-year-old Emmy was taking a nap along with her classmates when a former police officer broke in, armed with a knife and a gun. After shooting staff, including a teacher who was 8 months pregnant, he proceeded to kill all the infants but missed Emmy, who was lying under a blanket. Her grandfather and carer, Samsak Sri Thong, spoke to the BBC's Laura Bicker.
Has she told you how she survived?
ว่าเขาฟื้นขึ้นมาเขานอนขึ้นมาก็เลี้ยวเห็นเพื่อนเขาไม่นึกว่าเพื่อน
She had no idea what was happening when she woke up. We think she thought her friends were still asleep. A police officer covered her face with a cloth and carried her away from the horrific scene.
เขาเลยอุ้มออกมาเขาพาปลุกหน้า
Her close friend that was sleeping next to her is dead. When I picked her up at school, she kept saying, "Where is Touching? Please take him home." She didn't know he was gone.
So what do you explain, or how do you explain this now to her about what happened to her friends?
คุณตาได้ถามเขาไม่รู้เรื่องเลยเขาไม่รู้ว่าใครตายไหม
She keeps asking her grandmother if she can go to school. Eventually, we told her that all her friends had died, and her teacher too. We said the daycare center was closed. We decided to tell her the truth because she loved the daycare center and she wanted to be a teacher. She is too young to understand the concept of death.
And that was the grandfather of 3-year-old Emmy, who survived last week's massacre at a Thai nursery. It is almost 19 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The protests in Iran against the regime are now in its 4th week with no sign of it abating, despite violent attempts to suppress protesters. The protests were triggered by the death of 22-year-old Musa Armani while she was in police custody. A human rights group based in Norway says at least 185 people, including children, have been killed in the unrest so far. Despite an internet blackout by the authorities, videos are continuing to emerge of widespread unrest. The BBC's Anna Foster has been monitoring events close to the Iran-Iraq border.
They're into their 4th week now, and we saw yesterday one of the most significant days so far because geographically these protests really are spreading, and we're also seeing new demographics getting involved as well. They've been very much driven by young women like Mahsa Amini, the 22-year-old who died in police custody, and schools and universities have been at the forefront of the protests. But what we saw yesterday was bazaar holders in Tehran actually closing their shops in support, and you can really see the size of these protests. I've just been talking actually on the border here to some Iranians who are on the way out of the country because, of course, those testimonies are so hard to get and so hard to hear because of the situation in the country. But they were telling me that they came from one of the cities that saw protests yesterday. They believe that 10 people were killed in that protest, and they said that their lives at the moment are absolutely intolerable under the Iranian regime. They said it's about more than just the hijab. It's about oppression, repression. It's about corruption and the fact that they're scared to go onto the streets, they say, because they fear they could be picked up and killed by Iranian intelligence. And what they are hoping is that these protests spark some sort of change, and they want the international community to try and speed that along because they believe that it might not happen within Iran based on these protests alone.
And that was Anna Foster reporting. Spain's firefighters have been battling forest fires all summer. Now they're battling for their jobs. Mass protests among part-time firefighters have erupted and come to the heart of the capital, Madrid. Many firefighters are employed only on a temporary basis over summer to fight wildfires, and it was them who faced the full brunt of fires during Europe's heatwave. The BBC's Russell Trott reports.
Such is the strength of feeling amongst Spain's part-time firefighting crews that they were determined to fan the flames and smoke of dissent in the middle of the capital, Madrid. The 2,000 or so part-timers made their case loud and clear to demand a firefighter's statute to guarantee similar working rights to their full-time colleagues and recognise injuries inflicted whilst doing the job.
We are forest firefighters and we want justice because we are a public service for society. We want our administrations to recognise us and respect us and create a status for forest firefighters. We are here today, but we are not going to stop. This fire is not going to stop until our rights are recognised.
Wildfires that raged through Europe this summer set light to the second biggest area of land on record. A dozen European countries, including Spain, Italy and France, suffered major fires this year, forcing thousands to evacuate their homes and businesses, destroying many properties in the process. With winter looming, the wildfires may be over, but the firefighters, along with other Spanish workers, say their protests have only just begun.
It's National Day in Taiwan, a day when, despite recent threats by China, the island will celebrate its open society. Recent opinion polls suggest a greater number of people identify as Taiwanese and want the country to remain separate to China. It's something Beijing is not happy about. The BBC's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes reports.
These ponds in southern Taiwan are filled with gold. The huge fish thrashing around in Suguozheng's ponds are called grouper. On the tables of Beijing and Shanghai, each one can fetch up to $2,000 US. 80% of Taiwan's grouper used to go to China. Now it's zero. Beijing's import bans are hitting Taiwan where it hurts the most. So is it working? Older fishermen like me are nervous, he says. But the younger generation, they're not worried. They think, fine, if China doesn't want to buy our fish, we'll sell to other markets all over the world. China isn't just threatening Taiwan's economy. Since August, it's made repeated threats to take the island by force, test-firing dozens of missiles across the Taiwan Strait. But if Taiwan people are scared, they're not showing much sign of it. It's election season here, and at nightly rallies, candidates are on stage appealing to voters. Unlike in China, people here get to choose who rules them, and they're not about to give that up.
Taiwan is justifiably proud of its democracy. There is nothing like this anywhere else in the Chinese-speaking world. But it's not just Taiwan's democracy that is threatened by Xi Jinping. It's all of the rights and freedoms that people enjoy here, their whole way of life.
At their home in the south of Taipei, Mota and Siti are playing with their 2-year-old daughter Lin Chen. In 2019, Taiwan became the first country in Asia to legalise same-sex marriage. Siti is now expecting baby number 2. Being homosexual was something you had to hide, says Mota. But things have changed now. We're out in the open and the government has accepted and recognised us. For couples like this, the stakes couldn't be higher. Siti says if China wants Taiwan, it will have to invade. And if that happens, people like them will have no choice but to leave.
For months, a man-eating tiger has been terrorising villages in northeastern India. After a month-long hunt by hundreds of officers and wildlife officials, it's been shot dead. However, in a country where tigers were once on the brink of extinction, the killing highlights the problems caused by India's recent successes in increasing the number of tigers in the wild. The BBC's Vanessa Heaney reports.
For 28 days, villagers near the Valmiki Tiger Reserve in Champaran lived in fear, wondering when the Bengal tiger might strike again. Terrorised and under siege in their homes, they only ventured out to feed their cattle. At night, they banged tin pots, hoping to scare the tiger away. Wildlife officials scoured the district, following the beast over 30 kilometres. They hoped to catch it alive, but it always eluded them, hiding in fields of sugarcane. It became known as the man-eater of Champaran. It's thought it was born and raised in the sugarcane fields 3 or 4 years ago, but had lost its territory following a fight. It strayed into villages in search of prey. On Wednesday, it killed a 12-year-old girl while she lay sleeping under her mosquito net. And on Friday, it claimed its 8th victim, a man who had gone outside to go to the toilet in some bushes. Villagers were angry. They damaged a wildlife vehicle in protest. A shoot-to-kill policy was ordered. A massive tiger hunt set off, led by a special task force of Bihar police. 200 men and gunmen on elephants surrounded a village. All escape routes were blocked. The tiger had nowhere to run. On Saturday, hours after it had mauled a mother and daughter, the tiger was finally shot and killed. Reports say in its final moments, the beast made eye contact with the hunters, but it didn't try to run.
China has successfully launched its latest 2 new satellites. Authorities say the satellites will be used to help global navigation and communications. Although the launch was fairly routine, where they were launched from was a little out of the ordinary. The BBC's Tim Ormond explains.
When you think of rocket launches, this is probably the sort of thing you have in mind. A big, controlled explosion and tons of metal heading into space. But when it comes to slipping the surly bonds of Earth, the Earth bit has always been a fairly important part of the equation. Tell that to the Chinese, who are now launching rockets from on board a ship. This giant vessel heads out to the Yellow Sea, a few kilometres off the coast, providing both innovation and flexibility.
There are different launch sites to choose from for a seaborne launch, making it easier to find a safe area for rocket debris. Therefore, it's more convenient than launching from land.
It also helps that the launch site is not a fixed point. Taking off from different latitudes means you can choose different orbits, which saves costs on fuel. The sea has long been an important part of the space exploration journey, with splashdown often the final chapter of each mission. But now China has turned that on its head, from the high seas to outer space.
And some of your feedback before we head off on our interview with Josephine Bartley, who's been returned to her job on council. This person says of her interview, her name should be up in lights, and her message relayed to every politician. Paraphrased, she is there for the people and ignores political affiliations. Well said, reckons Stewart. Well done, Josephine. Another person says so proactive and deserves a senior position in council. If you missed anything on Checkpoint this evening, you can find it again on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi Popo, and tomorrow from 5 a.m, it's one of the worst recorded whale strandings. First up is live on the Chatham Islands, as an estimated 250 more pilot whales have beached themselves today. So do tune in for that, 5 a.m. tomorrow. Have a great evening. Kia pai tōpō, and we will catch you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Auckland's new mayor is calling on the head of the city's economic development arm to quit after receiving briefings on council finances. The winner of the Far North's mayoral race will remain up in the air for at least another day after Moko Te Pāngia took the lead from former Deputy Mayor Anne Court. And National Party leader Christopher Luxon says the local election results are a call for change from voters, but the Prime Minister says simple comparisons can't be made between sentiment at local and central government. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Pacific Waves, delving deeper into the major Pacific stories of the week in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the region and the world. I bring you interviews with Pacific newsmakers, experts and commentators in their fields, as well as up-to-date coverage from our talented team here at RNZ Pacific and our correspondents on the ground in the region. Pacific Waves, 8:15 weeknights on RNZ National.
Trending Now is next up, and our first segment is from First Up, joining Nathan Rarere from the fresh produce markets as